Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're going to walk through how to build your own community. First, I want to remind you, if you're listening to this mid-2023, Google Universal Analytics is about to go away. You'll want to make sure that you have migrated to Google Analytics 4. But now we're going to talk about today's show. I have a question for you. What traits do humans have that distinguish us most from other species? There are a few answers, of course, but one I like comes from the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who said it was our ability to form society. In fact, he saw it as a critical adaptation that will ensure our survival. He said, quote, "The only way in which men can preserve themselves is by uniting their separate powers in a combination strong enough to overcome any resistance, uniting them so that their powers are directed by a single motive and act in concert." We can apply this to society as a whole. But there's good from coming together even in smaller communities. Think like countries and ethnic groups, service clubs, businesses, user groups, and client forums. All are undeniably powerful. In business, communities can diffuse customer problems, encourage some to become brand ambassadors, and provide a means of word-of-mouth marketing like no other channel can. But what does it take to grow and keep a community? Our guest is going to help us answer that. Throughout his career, he has done the posting and moderating that you must commit to if you're going to form an online community. He has been building communities that connect and educate professionals across myriad industries for the last decade or so. He's been part of Social Media Pulse, which is a community of practice for social media industry professionals. He also launched and ran the community program at Agorapulse. Having moved to the education sector, he currently serves as VP for Kaplan Community. Join me in welcoming Paul Bradley. I'm very glad to welcome Paul Bradley. Hey, thanks for coming on, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. Much appreciated.
You bet. So today we're going to talk about community. And we have a world we live in where people have either been pushed into communities or pulled into communities, depending on how you look at it. What I mean by that is that if we go back to mass advertising days, it seems like you could run, but you couldn't hide. Advertising was a channel that was going to be pelting you with all sorts of different messages, and you couldn't dodge them. But buyers and people who are interested in certain things have, thanks to new platforms, in a way of speaking, found a way to go underground to get where these messages can't necessarily reach them. And I'm talking about communities, notably private communities, forums. They can be open or closed, but these are places where it is about people reaching out to peers, people connecting to the central organizer. And, advertisers, frankly, are waiting outside the door, but they can't come in. This is so-called dark social. So it's a really fascinating area, and in the 2020s, I think it's a very important area that needs to be understood either as a tool to help people, or, and these aren't mutually exclusive, or an area where people can have some interaction with brands in the right setting. So I've kind of set the table there, but tell me, based on what I've said, is that how you see communities, or would you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think that's one way to frame it. And I think that, as you and I were just chatting in the pre-show, that I probably had a very narrow view of community not very long ago, let's say 5 years ago. I'd started in community at Intel and ADP, MicroStrategy, big SaaS companies, or in Intel's case, um, semiconductors and whatnot. And these are communities that were for support. And for a large part, community was seen initially sort of in the corporate world and even as a branding play, to providing an added layer of elite support. That's how you'd frame it outwardly. Inwardly, the executives would be coming to you talking about deflection and how many calls you
Right.
deflected from their support teams and whatnot. And
Right.
as a community manager, we tend to be kind of squishy and like we're all about like helping people and whatnot. So for us, we knew that we could pay the piper the right way in that we could generate the stats that we needed to make an executive who only cares about deflection happy by just making people happy. And so that's kind of why it's a field that actually people settle
Interesting.
into, of certain personalities settle into. But as time has progressed, there was kind of a snobbery, and I was very much a part of it, about community, what it was, and the lines that you didn't want to cross, and this is community, that's not community, and this, and I still fall victim to some of this stuff. But really, over the last few years, as the field and even the word and what it means has become just this oversaturated, ubiquitous thing.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's been a positive out of that is, why do we have to define it in a specific way? Why do those of us who maybe were doing it when nobody knew what it was need to feel like we're attached to the way that it used to be? We ought to all just be evolving and embracing the different ways community can achieve different ends. In my career, I've been fortunate enough to go from the support use case to a kind of a more marketing use case, working with a consulting team that worked on IBM's community and proving out things like a community member is 3 times more likely than a regular qualified lead to become a customer. And so that was data that we started working with that was really new and exciting to me. It was like, wow, community can do so much, Um, and what we're doing currently in my position at Agorapulse is we've created a community for not just our customers, anybody in the industry, because we believe that if we play a core role in educating them, helping them get their job done better today, helping them get a better job tomorrow, helping them career pivot, that when it comes time for them to buy a product in our sphere, they'll think of us positively. Now, hopefully we have all the features and whatnot they need. I think we'll be more competitive in that decision-making process because of it. And I also,
Right.
we're starting to prove out the model that our members are more likely to become a customer than a lead, even though we're not marketing to them at all, right? Like we're not selling our product at all. You can't buy our product in the community. You might see somebody like Teresa Anderson or whomever from our company in there having, meaningful conversations with people. And you'll obviously see my entire community team, who are employees of Agorapulse. But I really love to embrace these new ideas around what these things can be, because at the end of the day, it still goes back to that thing of, regardless of what the outcome is, I'm helping people. People need help. They want help. There's going to be business outcomes. People understand that. But everything I do in a given day, even if now it's to where now I'm head of community and I do a lot of stuff that's more administrative, or like
Sure.
when I was running the consulting team that worked with IBM, I was negotiating contracts at certain times or writing contracts. And that was preposterous, given my origin and English major background and everything like that. But one of the things that made me happy always is that no matter what I did, every single bit of it was knocking over a domino that ended in a string of somebody getting help. And
Yeah.
so I think those are the core things. Like, it can achieve business goals, almost any goal I think that you want, as long as you help people, right? Like, and so it's up to
I
you to
love
connect
that.
those dots. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. How I started it out, kind of looking at this as an audience that we can go after, and permeate with some messages. Yes, there needs to be an element of that. There has to be, usually at an executive level, a sponsor who is going to sign the check or allow the budget for the Pauls of the world to work on community. But that's completely separate from what you need to be doing in the trenches each day, which is helping. And I
Yeah.
love how you you can have your cake and eat it too, so long as you're transparent, right? I am from Agora Pulse. We are running an Agora Pulse community. And you asked a question just about social media in general, nothing to do with our product, but I'm helping you anyway, right?
Yeah.
That kind of transparency, it allows you to work in a 360-degree view. People are not going to have trouble with that. It's when you do it underhandedly, or tell them that they're coming into a community to get A, but you give them B. Like you said, you try to just answer the bare minimum, because really all that you're supposed to do is minimize support tickets, right? So that's
Right.
that's the right way and the wrong way to do this.
And that's kind of like, so I have this live stream that I do for Agora Pulse called The Trust. And like when we were trying to come up with a concept for the show, they'd asked, or I was talking to my boss, Daryl, who Daryl Perel.
Yep.
And he said, what do you want to talk about in terms of community building? And I thought about it for a day or two, and I was like, everybody's kind of like, everybody uses these same terms and whatnot. But one of the things I've always said on my LinkedIn is some version of, you earn trust and you work to keep it. And that's the job, right? In community is if people don't trust the resource as a valued place to be, they don't have time for it, right? Like they have to trust that it's something that's giving them information and that their motives are something they can tolerate, right? So I talked about before, like people will tolerate a certain level of marketing in our audience these days because they're digital marketers, right? We don't do it yet, but we've learned that so that we may go out and sell some sponsorships or something like that to our recurring properties. So it wouldn't be that we would necessarily have content in that community saying you ought to buy X product, but it might be the social media news this week is presented by X product or something, like fitting it into what people will tolerate and maintain their trust. Now, if you're in a support community and people have built up relationships in there and they're helping, and you've achieved sentient support, right? Like those zero touch solutions when people who are just customers are asking and answering questions and you're not even involved. If you were to come into that community, and believe me, they try to do it all the time, and start saying, the new version of the product that costs $8,000 more sure is great. And people are going to head over to LinkedIn. They're going to be gone. They're going to create their own Slack channel. And in fact, when I worked at Higher Logic, there was a user group there that had previously been, and we're talking about going back 10, 15 years, like to where these things were called user groups, and they would get together in person, and then their online presence would be just a way to keep in touch after that or in between.
Right.
There was a user group of a major like Fortune 50 company, not IBM, another one that we worked with, where they had been a community sponsored by that company. And somewhere in like the early teens, like 2013 or 14, the company did something. I don't remember exactly what, but it basically just fully broke trust with the whole audience of 50,000 people. And they said, okay, there's 50,000 of us. We're going to go start our own. And, everybody's going to pay $10 a year or something. Yeah. Right. Suddenly you've got a whole program with a $5 million budget. Well, and then they sell sponsorships and they do things, and it's a business they have on their hands. But the point being that the lesson I always took from that is that company could have been hosting that community and getting all the information and data and user information and behavioral information. And they did something that broke trust. And we're talking about 8, 9 years, 10 years later. This thing still exists, by the way, still spending a bunch of money. They still don't have it. And those people are out there using their product, and they've gone out on their own. So those are the stakes that you have when it comes to trust. So that's why I called my show The Trust, is that you can't break trust. And you have to work really hard to get it and to keep it. I mean, because I talk about this all the time. I don't know how many podcasts I've said this on now. So sorry. But I talk about a new adopter of a community as they come in. It's like you're trying to feed a squirrel out of your hand, right? You can't just walk up to a squirrel you've never seen and feed it out of your hand, unless you're in the National Mall in DC where the squirrels actually do that. It's they're just like fat little squirrels that tourists give them stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you got a wild squirrel here. You're in Yellowstone
in the woods.
Park. That thing is not going to come up and eat out of your hand. Now, if you came back every day and got a little closer or left something a little closer, you're coaxing them in to trust you, right? It's no different because adopting a community is difficult. It's something in a lot of cases that people have not done in the past. It's a new way of doing things. It's a new venue. It's a new type of learning and gaining of expertise and knowledge and everything like that. So you've got to work really hard to coax that squirrel over to your, to your hand. So, and then what you have to do is if there's one day ever that the squirrel came over and you slapped it, it's not coming back. Right.
Right.
And so
Or
that's what
the
I
day
talk
it
about
takes the
with
nut,
breaking
you put it
trust.
in a trap, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah.
that's it. You're done.
That's the end. It's not coming back anymore. And so, that's one thing that's important to think about is building trust, maintaining it, making sure that you remain something that people can actually feel secure about. Like, this is there to help me. And yeah, that's the game.
You have had the luck. I mean, you are working at very large numbers here. And I imagine that when you've gone from one job to another, you're stepping into a pre-existing community. Let's roll back. Let's imagine, I'm sure there are listeners who don't have a community currently, but it's on their, their performance plan, or, it's a department-wide initiative, and they're trying to picture what it's like to be where you are. So maybe you could tell us, what are those staple things that you, no matter which community you've been running, you notice these are always existent, and that at least will help somebody understand, okay, I got to start thinking now about eventually how those different building blocks are going to get put into the community. But, what are some things that every community kind of has to have?
So the answer is there isn't some things that every community has to have, and to treat like there's one thing I talk about all the time is like, you can't go after a new community that you're starting like the last one you started, or you can't get a blueprint from somebody else unless you're trying to do exactly what that person is doing, right? If there's a community out there that you're like, I just want to do exactly that, but for something else, then use that blueprint.
Be careful. Yeah.
But no, I mean, you can use it like if it works, but like the thing is audiences are different every single time. You're in Canada, I'm in the US. I worked for ADP for 4 years. And for the first 2 years I was there, I worked 12, 14 hours a day on the US community. I had no help on the actual day-to-day community management. And I was super passionate about it. And then one day they came to me and said, the woman who's been running the Canadian version of this has been promoted. And so we're just going to give it to you. And I said, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's like saying to somebody, I'm just going to like give you 100 sandwiches for lunch today. And like, what? Like, that's just you don't understand what you're asking.
Right.
And so I ended up in not a great position where I knew that, okay, if I want to serve this community, it had less people. It had maybe 5,000 users versus 50,000 for the US community. Yeah. But it was trying to achieve the same thing for a different version of the product. ADP is a payroll product, so obviously payroll is different. Laws are different in Canada and whatnot. The only recourse I had was I had like a very intricate education or editorial calendar and content plan, engagement plan. The only recourse I had was just to take everything I did in the US and paste it in there in Canada and cross my fingers, right? I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't going to work the same way that it would work in the US. I had no choice, right? And it became an experiment in the fact that communities aren't the same. You can't, like, payroll professionals in Canada are not the same as payroll professionals in the US. And one of the things that I learned that was extremely poignant was that there was no reason a non-Canadian should be running that community at all. It had to be somebody who understands that culture, and people might laugh and say, how different is the culture? It's different. And they spell things differently, and people respect
take it from you.
Right. Trust is often bred of shared experience, right? Like, so if you have somebody who's, who's from that country, that is optimal. And so there were a lot of lessons learned there about, just the fact that like the content that would go gangbusters in the US would fall flat in Canada. The jokes or the the way people engaged was completely different, right? And I knew it would be. I just had no choice if I didn't want to work 24 hours a day. And so eventually we got a Canadian community manager in there. And wouldn't you know it, she was able, she's a great friend of mine. She was able to take some lessons from some stuff that I did and give it her own voice. And people
put a twist
respected
on it.
her.
Yep.
Yeah. But then also come up with her own stuff, right? Because she didn't need to use my stuff. And so circling back to the original question, the first thing the person who wants to start the community needs to do, because there's two scenarios that you mentioned. One, you mentioned you already have buy-in from an executive. I would say let's start from you don't have buy-in from an executive. I recently met somebody who wanted to solve a problem at their company and happened to be an executive themselves, and just sort of like took some of their discretionary budget and started a community, proved out the use case, and then C-level was in, right? Now, the important thing for that, but again, not many people have that ability, right? Usually it's somebody on the normal marketing team. They don't have discretionary budget. So I would say, like, the first thing that person needs to ask in order to get buy-in, regardless of who's above them on the totem pole and decision-making process, is really have a clear idea of why they want a community. Right. It can't just be, I think it's cool, or it can't just be such and such does it. It has to have an outcome that matters. And it needs to have it needs to be something like, our support team is gassed. We're having to hire 20 support people a month and we can't afford it. So we need to see if we can deflect 48% of the calls. That's a reason. Right. Or people hate us. And we'd like to set spread out some goodwill and get the company some positive brand engagement. Boom. That's a reason, right? And knowing which of those sorts of reasons matters to the people above you, right? Like, I'm sure you in your normal job, you get a sense of the sort of outcomes that you are expected to deliver. And so if you have an idea, the community will help you deliver those outcomes tied together. It can't just be like, let's turn this thing on and let's get people together and let's see what they say, right? It needs to be, what's the outcome internally? Like, what do I want out of it? Okay, then I need to go find, again, you asked one question and I've gone on for 20 minutes, but it's good. It's my nature. But then you need to go actually talk to those people. You don't want to come up with a plan for your community based on your intercompany outcome or your personal professional outcome.
I was just going to say, we have to remember they're there for the full life cycle, right? So if we're just thinking, I'm only here at the marketing stage, so it's acquisition, for example, or we're working on trying to help out support, so we're going to only worry about retention. No, that's not how they're going to look at it. They don't really give a care about your business casing, the fact that you have to get executives from those internal teams to nod for this to happen. So it's all there's, I think, in the ideal situation, tell me if you agree, is where there's commonality between what the internal goal is and this rallying point that will bring this audience together. I mean, if the audience, so let me take Agorapulse. I'll take a kick at this. It would be something like, social media is now so important that it can't just be on the corner of someone's desk. It needs a manager and it needs expertise. It's a profession. And come one, come all, if you want to learn how to be better at social media. Like, is that, I can hear that reverberating both inside and outside the company.
Yeah, well, so it's about taking what your company wants internally and what the audience wants externally, as it were, and connecting those two. And so the community manager's job is to create that connection. And so, the next place I was going was, you need to go do discovery with your different personas who are interested in your industry, in the field that you're trying to discuss, in the product and whatever. In the case of what we're doing at Agorapulse, Emmerich Arnault, our CEO, who's been running Agorapulse for 10, 12 years, has great relationships out there in this digital marketing community and social media marketing community. And he was hearing overwhelmingly over a period of years, even during COVID, when he couldn't go to events, or when people were gathering in communities, people would come to him and say, why don't we have a place? Like it's so ironic that they're out there fostering community on social and other places, that they felt they didn't have their own community short of these events and things like that, but they didn't have a day-to-day place. They said, Emmerich, there's no place for me to go get help.
Yeah.
And Emmerich is a true, like when you talk about like corporate altruism, he's just an altruistic guy. He just wants to help people. And he knows that if he helps people, like again, like we talked about earlier, that like it's about brand image. Like you want people to feel what we feel internally as a company, which is that we are a supportive, helpful group, and that everybody here is got positive vibes all the time. Why not use something to kind of get that out there more often so people know it? And then when they know it's time to pick between Agorapulse and others, like, listen, this isn't false. We didn't make this up. This is how we do things. We're getting out there to help you. We want to give you educational tools. We want to give you networking tools. We want to give you day-to-day information that helps you distill the news and learn new tricks. And so they were coming to him. And so when I came in and I did 10, 12, 14 hours worth of interviews with Michael, Angeletta, and with Emmerich in the process leading up to taking the gig. And they told me that, and I said, okay, now I need to go talk to these people and see what they have to say. And I spent a solid period of time talking to people. We put out an email sent by Emmerich, said, here's this guy's Calendly, find some time. And I just had calls with people. It was crazy. And people would no-show all the time because, you know, it's like something they did on a whim, right? Because of an email they got. So, you know, it was, but like basically the goal was keep talking to people until you start to hear the same things over and over. And we built up five different pillars that would be what everything we did would drive toward in the community all the time. And so for us, the connection was really simple. Nobody helps me, and we want you to feel like we help you, right? So that's a really simple use case. We want you to feel helped. So for us, it was just like, okay, I just went in, I identified all the things that are their main pain points. I can't find people that, I can't hire people I can trust that they have the skills. Easy. I need guidance. I need social media insights. I need authority. I want opportunities to educate others. You know, and that became basically our marching orders. Everything that we do in the community, from putting out one question about like, what's your favorite TikTok or something, needs to be servicing those goals. You know, that needs to be servicing those 5 things. If it's not, don't do it. And it goes back to like, why are you doing community? And you've got to always be keeping that front of mind. So.
Wow. No, I love that. And I do think, I mean, you can call them different things. You call them 5 pillars. I hear some people say their community has a manifesto or a mission statement. The point is, yes, when you have a audience that is segmentable, and you have gotten in touch with them enough to really understand their motivations, even their hopes and dreams, you're going to get that pattern. And when you hit the pattern, then you know that that's what is going to be the core. It's going to keep them, you know, that small initial core that you have together, but it's going to attract in others. I was reading recently about Wikipedia and how it got its start. And it didn't get its start as Wikipedia. It was actually, there was another kind of a, like, remember old, you know, internet IRCs, you know, and chat rooms and kind of, so there was a one about there that was kind of almost like trivia, right? Just about facts and interesting information. And somebody kind of came into that group and said, you know, we have kind of a core group here that, you know, this critical mass could actually pull off building out an encyclopedia, you know, and we all really love facts, and we want facts to be right. So what do you say? You know, are you ready for us to give this a go? And that was the launch. of that. And I'll just finish off you mentioning about Emmerich and what he was hearing and how it has led to the community and to what you are there for now and the team. But if we back up to when he was looking at should there be a community, I was hearing somewhere between your words, the audience is seeking it, and if you don't provide it, they'll go elsewhere and find it or make one of their own. So there
Yeah.
is a little bit of, I have to think that somewhere in that internal business case, that has to be mentioned, because it will be, the audience will find a way to glom onto each other. They will find each other. They will do it. The question is, will they do it around your tent pole?
You have to recognize the opportunity, right? It's like with anything, it's like being an inventor. And so if you see that moment, that's just left its soft belly open to you, right? And so that's what he
Yep.
saw. He saw that moment was there, and to your point, thought, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. And in Agorapulse's case, they're able to provide it for free, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of other entities out there aren't, because they're not a big
Right.
company with budgets and interdepartmental budgets and everything like that. Most of the communities for social media managers need to be paid, because these are people out there building businesses in the trenches and whatnot. But for those people, who builds a community for them, And so that's kind of like, it's like being,
Yeah.
and when we talk about, we don't view communities like that as competitors either. We view them as people we want to prop up and, promote and really like display as experts and leaders in the field. We don't view anyone as our competitor. In fact, again, it is a truly altruistic play. And so, but Emmerich has said this to me, and I've said it a number of times too, like to what you just said. You need to be in the conversation. Like, they come to, like, that's it. If you're the one providing the venue, you're in the conversation. But it also, if you're thinking about that company I was telling you about before that lost its huge community,
Yes.
you got to earn your keep to stay in the conversation. Just because you put it out there doesn't mean, exactly to what you were saying before, they can't just go at any moment. And so, and you've got to build that trust in order to get them there, having the conversation where you built the place for it.
It would be the difference to me between, let's say, being a warden who runs a prison and a host who is having party guests over. The warden gets to say, you stay, but that's not reality. In any community that we have, it's more like there's a party going on. We're the host. And if the party finds that, the chips are dry and the drinks are all gone, well, they're out the door, and you now no longer have a party.
Yeah. My old boss, Heather McNair, used to call communities the party and like the community managers the host. She would say that all the time. I always thought of it. I went to college in New Orleans, so I thought of it as like you're the bar manager who needs to keep people in the bar in perpetuity, right? Like, like the bar doesn't close, so you want to keep it as full as possible, 24 hours a day.
Well, yeah, except we're doing something here that's maybe a little bit more helpful and not as hard on people's livers.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to take a quick break, Paul, and then we're going to come in to talking about a few of the kind of more operational meat and potatoes parts of this, but we'll take a quick break. I'm taking a moment talking about how you're managing in the world of GA4. To me, the new Google Analytics is more than just an interface. Its capabilities open up our entire funnel for analytical insights and for activating our marketing data. Now, most of you have installed GA4. That's great. To do this takes a bit more effort than that, because you must configure GA4 with Google Cloud components, takes BigQuery, Looker Studio, services that API data back and forth, etc. And that's why I'm holding GA Fast Forward in-person events to do this over 2 days with people. A group of us work together to implement this new stack using our own company's marketing data. We come away with ready-made dashboards and AI-built audiences that we can leverage in our Google Ads. These workshops are running in Eastern Canada and across New York State, and soon in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts too. You can go now and see all the details by going to gafastforward.com. Either with the number 4 in fast forward, or all spelled out. Let's get back to the show. Okay, so let's come back to what it's like to be the person who is running. Sometimes it's moderating these kind of communities. Let's imagine that somebody listening to this has just been appointed a community manager. They may find that there are, let's say there is a small, a fledgling community in existence, but they need to maybe help soften the rough edges a little. Maybe there is one community member that's hogging the room, stealing all the oxygen, and kind of making statements that are more in their favor than for the group. Maybe they're even being salesy, God forbid. What kind of things do you suggest to try to foster communication, but also to have some basic rules, some basic codes of conduct, that a person who's running things needs to use? And when somebody steps out of line with those, what does a community manager do about it?
So I've been in those situations for sure. I've been in a situation where I was kind of a new community manager and came into a rough around the edges community for sure. And I've also been in a situation where I had a community member who was sucking up all the oxygen. And certainly been in the situation where people are trying to sell stuff or use a support community as a way to post jobs. You need to figure out what the audience you found out what the audience wanted, right? If the audience wanted job posts when you talk to them, then that's what you have. But if they just want help and they don't want noise and they don't want people trying to benefit other than like having a problem solved, then you need to create your codes of contact or conduct accordingly. And in a lot of cases, like it's very stringent because it's about maintaining that trust, right? Like I hate to sound like a broken record. So you need to write very clearly codes of conduct so that when people violate them, you can go to them and say, you agreed to the terms of service of this community when you joined it and you violated that. I'm sorry about it. You try to be cool to them because you don't want to lose their traffic until the day you do, right? Like you don't want to lose their voice, or you don't want to, you want to create ambassadors. You don't want to create anti-ambassadors either, who would go out and be like, they didn't.
Or it could just be a blind spot, right? Maybe they just don't see it, and you just have to kind of take them aside and remind them, okay, this is how that looks. And, you really don't want to, that's not a good look. So as a good community member, both on the sending and receiving side, you should refrain from doing that again.
Yeah. And I found when you do that, typically, even if you're doing it in a way that's like that lands very softly, where you're trying to maintain that, the person, if they're truly disruptive or they're truly kind of not the kind of person you want there, the second you do that to them, they never come back in a lot of cases. And if they do, you have to take steps, right? But people have a way of it goes back to building trust. Like if there's somebody that is being disruptive or being offensive or whatever, you need to tell them, here's how you violated the terms and conditions, and, gauge whether or not that person is somebody that you want around. So you can deliver the message in any number of ways. But people tend to not come back to places where they don't feel welcome, right? And so if you had a community where it's an open, let's say it's an open community of anybody can join it, right? You might end up with a lot of people like this. And so your math is going to be different than versus one where somebody coming in there being disruptive might represent $1 million account. And so there's a lot that you have to do. And really it's just, social engineering, right? Like you need to solve the problem yourself. People want to, if they're engaging in community, they want to be liked. They want to do it the right way. If they're trying to sell that audience, that means that they respect that audience. and they think that there's somebody who might enrich their career. So I think it's a matter of, like I said, a community manager is typically an empath. It's somebody who wants to help the most people. It's somebody who has made a career out of putting themselves in other people's shoes. And so usually the ones who are the most successful are the ones who can gauge those situations well and think, okay, where's this person coming from, rather than where am I coming from? The community manager should never think about where they're coming from, or at least as little as possible, because it's not about you.
Yeah. So that social engineering comment, I mean, that seems to me like you've got a mixture of carrots and sticks, right? So, and let's go with a closed community here. So I suppose the ultimate stick is the ban hammer. So, you can do that and kick them out of the group. But there are other carrots. Like if I think of many platforms have different channels within the
Yeah.
overall forum. So you say there seems to be an interest in posting jobs here. How would everybody feel if we put another channel in this entire catalog here and let people throw them there? If you don't want to look at them, you don't have to, but they're there for the people who do.
That's a perfect example of how you'd solve a problem like that. Like if you have, in our case, in social media posts, we don't want a bunch of people promoting themselves all over the place.
Yep.
But we want people to feel like they can promote themselves. So we have one thread where it's appropriate for people to talk about their offerings. And everybody knows that's what that thread is.
Yep.
It's not interjecting with any conversations that are not about that. And that anybody who wants to be a part of it can, tell people about who they are, what they represent, and all that. And it's good. Years ago at ADP, we had people who were being really social in the community. And it was such a great problem to have, because they're showing recipes and pictures of their wedding and their vacation, and people love it. But there's a lot of people who are like, I'm here to solve payroll problems. I don't want to sift through all this stuff. So what we did was we were like, guys, we didn't say a lot of people don't like this. We said, hey guys, since there's so much awesome content that we've got together that's like social and fun, we've created a new place, and it's called The Deck. And all you have to do is come and join it, right? And then and we're going to share all the fun stuff and blah, 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 this and that. Well, the beauty of that was if you weren't joined to it, it wouldn't show up in the feed on the homepage. So
Right.
all you saw was payroll stuff. If you were joined to it, it was there in your feed on the homepage, and you were the one who liked it there to begin with, right? If you stopped liking it, you can leave the group. That group started accounting for a short period of time, because then suddenly we had 100,000 users. But for a brief period of time, that group was accounting for 50% of our activity, engagement, and traffic, and all that. And it continued on, and it stayed at about the same level of engagement over years, because the people who really wanted to do it were there, and they were sharing recipes and pictures of the ribs they cooked for the national championship game and things like that, and it worked out.
Wow. I want to tackle one area of this that, you said you're growing to 100,000. I mean, that blows my mind, but, the marketer in me wants to know, is a community something that you can actually have a goal around? So maybe it's a goal like, I want to grow this. And I'm going to take a stab at what I think the answer is, because even if you want your numbers and your traffic, your engagement to all go up, um, it's going to be done the old-fashioned way that you said, where you're going to build trust, you're going to have good information on there, and it's the people who are inside the community who are going to go and find the next set of people who are currently outside the community to come in. So, it's a two-stepper. We can't think of it as, I'm just going to go and plaster everywhere externally that this community exists. I would imagine, you correct me, that the best way that you can grow your community is to show love to the people who are already in it. They'll
Yeah.
evangelize it for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you certainly, if you have resources and ability to talk about the community in a way that seems genuine in other places, you should do it. But again, you don't want to seem like you're like just scattershotting things or that you're just spending a bunch of money or whatever. Cause like that sort of like external awareness of it is for the moment that that person who's already in there tells you it's great. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know what? I saw that. I saw their logo, you know, as a sponsor on a webinar I went to a month ago. Again, if you don't have budget for that, then doesn't matter. Like I've had communities where we had no budget, like we couldn't even get an email sent to the
Wow.
customers at the company. Like they told us, like if you want to get an email sent to all of our customers, it'll take you a year. Um, and so we had to build it word of mouth by going into other places
Yes.
that they frequented, finding LinkedIn groups, things like that, and letting them know, like, hey, we're doing this over here. And they'd say something to me like, well, why would we go do that over there when we could do it over here? And I'd be like, listen, just think about it.
Yeah. Or
We're
I've
doing it.
also seen them. You do what some people call content upgrades, right? So you will talk a little bit on that LinkedIn or some other non-owned place, but you will say, we've got the rest of that research or whatever it is.
Yeah,
We've just put it in here.
pop
So
it over
if
here.
if you come on over here, it's there for the taking. It doesn't mean you have to come every day, but that's where it is. And maybe while you're there, you'll look around and find something you like.
Yeah, in those cases, what I was doing in that LinkedIn group was I would go look for um, questions that had already been answered in our community because I was so involved in the day to day that I knew every question that had been asked. And so I just go see if somebody had asked it in the LinkedIn group, and I'd be like, "Oh, you know what? The
Right.
answer to this is over here." And invariably, someone would say like, "You just want us to go over to where ADP is so they can watch us or whatever." And I was just like, "Listen, I'm just telling you the answer's over here. We'd love to see you, and whatever." And we over time, based on exactly what you just said, bled that LinkedIn group dry, and nobody was going there anymore because people
Wow.
who like people who. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is people that day might have learned we existed and not gone. But at some point, they talked to somebody in the field who, because of the good work we were doing, like you said, told them, "Oh, the bridge from ADP, that's amazing."
Yeah.
And they said, "You know
Yeah.
what? I saw that in the LinkedIn group. I remember that guy. He did seem nice. He wasn't being a jerk. He helped someone." And they go over there, and that starts that trust ball, like building your trust ball as it rolls along the way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. We're
so
recording this in late 2022, and I see the whole thing playing out, what you just described, with what's going on right now with Twitter. And just, for people who are hearing this later and know whatever the outcome is, Paul and I don't. But that same notion of people are right now in a tentative state. They may go somewhere else, or some of them are verging off into private areas that are just a cluster of people who share an interest. This is how people act. So you can, it's neither a positive nor a negative force. It's all a force of which way you're moving it. Which are you at the tip of the arrow or are you at the tail of the arrow?
mhm.
Just to kind of move through, what's your take on incentivizing engagement? So some closed forums, they will get cutesy. Maybe it's swag. I know some of them are now getting into NFTs and other means of
Mhm.
trying to give tokens and whatnot for engagement. What's your take?
I love gamification. I love recognition. The first communities that I built were built largely on recognizing the people who are taking the time out of their day to make it a great place.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be really creative, especially if you have no budget, and realize that people. What people value. So it goes back to knowing your audience. A lot of times people will say, especially if you represent a company or something, like they want access to the experts that you've got, or your own expertise. Give them your time, right? Like time's a valuable commodity. Show people that respect.
Yeah,
It's
no,
there's
it's
yeah.
that they will. I know this. I mean, this halo effect of you answered a question that I have spent months suffering in silence on. It was your expertise that brought it to me. You know, I'm on board with. I'm going to follow you like a puppy. That's how
Yeah.
people do it. And as you say, even just the smallest little thank you. I remember hearing that in the early days of Reddit, Alex Ohanian would take time out of his day to send a private message to
I
somebody
read
who
that.
said
Yeah.
something valuable on Reddit. On Reddit! Like,
Yeah. You would
how
do it
does
every
he
day,
have that
right?
kind of time? I mean, I'm getting a glimpse into your 14-hour days when you talk about doing that.
That's what it was
But
like.
if
Yeah.
you do it, it goes so far with people, right?
It does. Yeah. And I think I saw either Alex Ohanian or Evan Hamilton, who used to be the community director at Reddit, say that they, for a time, had people writing welcome, like personal welcome messages that weren't automated to people
Wow.
as they joined, which is as good as it gets. Unfortunately, when you scale, that starts to be
Yep.
more difficult.
Yep.
But I think that one thing, when people tell me what they think the most successful online community is, I always say that it's Reddit, because of the way that they've done things, and the very much you don't hear people talking about Reddit's algorithm screwing up their day or anything like that, right? Like Reddit's a
Right.
pirate ship, and they've
Yes.
achieved what they achieve with 700 employees, and they really
Yeah.
do it by thinking about their users, and again, they're very focused on nurturing them and not breaking trust. So, and I'm
Yeah.
sure
No,
people can provide me with examples where they
you
have.
have to kind of, well, I think it takes that kind of belief in grassroots through and through. When people are, getting together, which, is starting to happen again, though maybe not as much as before. You hear about things like unconferences, right? Where people vote on the topics and the speakers don't know until just before they're about to go on whether or not their session is going to actually be delivered. But this kind of commitment to hearing what the members say, listening to them, and
Mhm.
even wherever possible, changing the organization of the community, you know, when a majority of them seem to be moving in this direction. Um, Again, they'll love you forever.
Yeah.
They will be fans. I mean, would you agree even that it's possible for a large organization, if they have members in that community, wouldn't you look, if you're hiring for people who know your product or want to have a say in how your products are used by others, going to your community and tapping that group, for your
Yeah.
resource? These are the dividends that come out of paying attention to them, and the market research that you're also able to get. You're listening, you're getting ideas for product enhancements. It goes on and on.
Community members get hired by companies all the time. Um, and in fact too, like, I've been in situations where I had internal people at company who weren't compelled to use our community at all, just started doing it to try to help the customers out of the,
Spontaneously.
like, just goodness of their heart. And I'm just like, I've hired those people. I've been like, that they're hired. Like, if they want to be a community, if they want to pivot out of whatever they're doing and become a community
Right.
manager, they're hired. Like, if that impulse, if you have that natural impulse, that's it. That's all you need. I hired a woman when I worked at Higher Logic on the consulting team with IBM, who didn't like her career, and she, to solve that problem, like, she was in a group of people who, like, a group of fans who listened to a podcast, and she would be on Facebook every day talking to these people. And she thought, well, a lot of the people in this group are like me. They're my age, and we
Hmm.
probably have a lot of the same interests or have a lot of the same problems. And right now, my problem is I hate my career. And so she just started a career networking group for just the people who listen to this podcast that is about pop culture, right? It's completely separate.
Wow.
But when she was sitting, and it became a success, and she started getting people jobs, and a woman on my team who was her age, they're in their mid 20s, got to know her and saw that people in this group were getting jobs. And when we had a job come up, she was like, "Hey, do you want to interview for it?" And as Kayla, who told me about her, was previewing the interview and told me about this. I had hired her before I spoke to her because she started a community to solve a major problem in her life. Like she saw an issue in her life, a fundamental issue in her life. And to solve that issue, she created a community. So it's like, who would I hire that would have better instincts and thought processes than this? And this woman named Jessica Long, and she currently now has moved on. She's on the Alteryx community team, which is probably the best community team in the world. They have 20 some odd people. They're so specialized. It's what every community team is probably aspiring to. She's on that team today because she started that community on Facebook, 6 or 7 years ago. So
yeah. Cool. So I think we've kind of gone all around here because you could even imagine that there might be somebody listening here who may not be so crazy about the aspect of marketing that they're doing now, but they've got that passion and are willing to maybe help organize people. If they can't find the people that are like them, they will go and make a place where they can be found. And that's, I think, such a great point to maybe come back to almost the beginning of, there is no group. Okay, well, go make one. You don't see any leaders around. Well, look at yourself. You could lead. Yeah. and they will, leaders are needed. There's not enough of them. And you've certainly shown some great leadership on the community front. And I want to thank you for taking time to help make sense of it for us. Where can people find out about you, Paul? Where do you want to send them?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just Paul, I think it's LinkedIn, Paul M. Bradley. Work at Agora Pulse. You can find me. Just search for Paul Bradley. My Twitter handle is @PaulMajor. It's MAJOR. So you can find me there. And Social Media Pulse. It is socialmediapulse.community. That is the community that we have, that Agora Pulse has so graciously put together to help you from soup to nuts become a better social media manager than you were yesterday and get yourself educated up.
Wow. Thanks once again for coming on the show, Paul.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and catch you soon.
You bet. And to the listener, this is, I hope, been an eye-opening glimpse into a part of marketing that we may not think of, or how marketing can at least be useful to the people who are trying to organize communities and help all the people who share an interest with them. This is another way that you're getting insight that can hopefully help you make your marketing even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @FunnelReboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.